All right, we are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us on this Monday, the day before the election. Tomorrow, of course, we're talking politics this morning with Representative Johnny Garrett. He's a Republican from Goodlettsville. Also with us is Representative John Ray Clements, a Democrat from Nashville. Thank you, gentlemen, both for joining us this morning. And we've got some phone calls. We'll back and forth. We just want to be as fair as possible, let everyone respond to each other, and you guys are very good, and I appreciate that. The fact that you both have very differing opinions, but there's a mutual respect that I can appreciate. You respect each other. Let's go next to Joe. Joe, good morning. What's your question or comment for our guests?
Nick, just a couple of comments. This president has done more in 4 years to divide this country than I can remember since I've been around, and I've been around a long time. Politicians in the past have differed in their thoughts and what they did, but they did kind of meet halfway and negotiate on some of the things that we need to negotiate on. This guy here, if we got 4 more years of this, I don't know what's going to happen to this country.
All right, we didn't get to the national politics, but I want to get your take from both of you with regard to the presidential race and however that plays out, what impact it may or may not have here in the state of Tennessee when you think about coattails or, if there's, a good turnout for President Trump or for former Vice President Biden, how that might play out in, say, for instance, state of Tennessee. Go ahead, Representative Garrett.
Thank you, and thank you for that comment. Bipartisanship in a way is good, but also partisanship is good. Just like John Ray, with his views, and I may disagree with those views, but it keeps me on my toes. Just like with the views that I have that he disagrees with, it certainly keeps him on his toes. And like I said before, at least in Tennessee, 95 to 96 to 97% of the laws that we do pass, and the regulations, the policies that we pass in Nashville are on a bipartisan basis. Now, when it comes to our national ticket, I think both sides are to blame for the division in this country. When you have our Speaker of the House during the State of the Union ripping up the president's speech, regardless of her affection or non-affection for that particular president, doesn't send a good signal on national TV of what her particular views was a speech that's to the country. And of course, the rhetoric that also our president does, it doesn't move the needle. So I would love to see more work between the Republicans and the Democratic Party. But we are a divided country. You can look at the Senate. The Senate is very close. I think the Republicans are going to hold the Senate, the U.S. Senate. I think the House is going to stay in the Democratic-controlled hands. So if we have a Republican president when Trump gets reelected tomorrow, it's going to be a lot of divide that's already going to continue. And so in a way, it's good because partisanship is good. That's the way our country was founded, with two different parties with different views on what makes sense. What matters is for us that are in elected office to continue to describe and advocate why we think our particular issues and values are better than the others. And that's where people vote to decide where they more relate to. That's the very foundation of our country, to have 2 or more different views, and that voter gets to choose which way they're going to go.
Representative Clements?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I think Joe's right. It's unfortunate. As a student of history, you look back over time and you see how presidents who've led this country have reacted. We've been blessed to have 45 presidents, and every time we've had a transition of power, it's been peaceful, regardless of the feelings of the supporters or the administration on either side of the aisle. A lot of what this president has done is unprecedented, some of which is not unprecedented, and it's truly unfortunate. And you hope that you have a president who will lead by example. And I think how this president reacts tomorrow night, win or lose, will set the tone for how the country responds as well. Because unfortunately, we are seeing great division across the country, and some of that is self-inflicted. Anytime you have an action, you have an equal or opposite reaction. And I don't think anything the Democrats have done has been equal to the action that caused any reaction across this country. It's truly an unfortunate circumstance in which we find ourselves. Representative Garrett and I are fortunate. We have the ability, and maybe just our legal training, we know that we're not right 100% of the time. And it's accepting that, as hard as that is sometimes, to know that we're not right 100% of the time, makes things a lot easier. Because when you have a fierce debate or an argument, in the committee room or on the House floor, that's where it ends. And you can go outside and you can shake hands and you talk about our family. Unfortunately, that's not the case in some ways on the national level or even at the state level in too many instances. But, I would hope, and I'd like to make a formal request, and I know Representative Garrett would too, that our leaders lead by example and set the tone for how this country reacts in the coming days and weeks as this election unfolds.
We've got more phone calls. We've got a couple Marys in a row. We'll take the first Mary. Mary, good morning. Go ahead, Mary. Are you there, Mary?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. Yes,
Hi.
So my first comment is John Ray Clemens, good luck tomorrow. Looking forward to having you represent me for the next term. My second comment is, with the margins being the way they are currently and, everything being so inconclusive, who do you honestly think will win the election?
Are you talking about the presidential election?
Presidential election for 2020 between Trump and Biden.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Do you have a follow-up? Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. And then my last comment will be, most of the voters that vote for Donald Trump are white, not college-educated individuals. Maybe if they would take some initiative to read more into what he's actually doing versus what he's turning our country into, maybe they would be able to see the brighter side. Blue Wave 2020.
All right. And we want to say, by the way, we take these calls just as they come in. We're not screening any as they come in. We've got Mary coming up next. Look, I don't know about you guys, but I only put so much into polls. I kind of tend to not pay attention to them anymore, leading up to it. How about the two of you? I suspect I understand you each are going to say who you think is going to win, and I think I could probably guess who that is. Yeah, if you want to elaborate a bit on that, and maybe also touch on, the thinking about with regard to voting turnout and the like, how confident you both are, especially here in Tennessee, and we've heard from the Secretary of State, that the voting results in these local races, your races, are going to be accurate and fair. Go ahead, Representative Garrett.
Thank you for that, and thank you for your call. I mean, obviously, from my comments before of being unpredictable, you can only have a guess, an educated guess on. I think from the national standpoint, I do think Trump's probably going to get reelected. I think it's going to be very, very close. I don't think Biden from the national polls is 10 points up. I think it's a lot closer race than that. I do think it's probably going to come down to what happens in Pennsylvania. We've got about 5 states: Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Michigan, and Arizona, and Wisconsin that's probably still in play. That's battleground states. And the way our electoral college system works, it's most likely going to come down to the state of Pennsylvania. And so that would be at least my prediction of that this is going to be a long evening and maybe even go into the night similar to how we, decided Bush v. Gore. And I don't mean going all the way to the Supreme Court. I just mean not knowing potentially who the president is, because we've got a lot of absentee and mail-out ballots out there that need to be counted to make sure that everyone's vote is secure and counted. I think it's extraordinary. I did the numbers a couple of days ago here in Sumner County, and we have just in early voting, we have outpaced in the presidential year in 2012 of the entire vote in Sumner County. We are 93% of what everybody voted right now in Sumner County in 2016 in the presidential year. So it's an extraordinary time. We want every single vote to count and every single vote to be secure in that count. And so I think it's going to be very, very long night. And I look forward to the country reelecting President Trump. And I also look forward to returning our 73 members, Republican members in the House, and keeping our supermajority in the Senate. I do think that's a real possibility, although we do have several races that are pretty close. And we're going to be watching that very, very closely to see how all that turns out. One thing that I can share that I do think is happening across the country. And I know my good friend John Ray will probably disagree with this, but there are several voters out there that we just don't know where they're voting from, because they've never voted in an election before, they've never voted in a primary before, or they're new voters. And we are understanding our statistics, and our research shows that those numbers are leaning towards Trump. And so that will help our all down ballot races across the country if those new voters and people that have voted only one time in a general are swinging towards the president.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry.
That we're going to reelect our Trump and reelect Trump and come back to the state legislature with a supermajority.
Okay, and real quick, Representative Garrett, just a yes or no before we get to Representative Clement. And you're confident here in Tennessee anyway in the integrity of the voting, right, and the results. You have no doubt about that.
I have no doubts about the confidence and integrity. Absolutely.
Okay, good. And how about you, Representative Clement? Go ahead and from the top, who you think and how you think it'll play out.
Well, getting back to my earlier point that I recognize that I'm not right 100% of the time. I've given up on making predictions in elections. I've been wrong probably more often than I've been right. However, I do believe if the polls are accurate, that Joe Biden will win the presidency. And the only way, if the polls are accurate, the only way he loses is if all the votes are not counted. And, you start to see a lot of very, very suspicious activity in some of these states that are up in play. And if they take judicial action or legal action to try to prevent votes from being counted, then we're going to be in real trouble. I don't think there's any question that Joe Biden wins the popular vote. I think, obviously it's going to come down to the Electoral College, which, we can have a debate about the Electoral College on another show, but I think Joe Biden definitely wins the popular vote. It's just going to come down to whether or not all the votes are counted in these states that are up in the air. And I think North Carolina is going to be the big indicator tomorrow night, and that'll really shift the burden over to Pennsylvania. If North Carolina goes Biden, I think this thing is wrapped up. We're going to have a new president of the United States who we can all get behind. I continue to be at a loss. I know we disagree on this, and I certainly do with others, but I simply don't understand how anyone in this country can be undecided right now. And if they are undecided, how they could possibly be leaning towards Donald Trump. There is absolutely nothing in his record, nothing in his personality or his character. The very fiber of his being lacks all morality. I don't understand how anyone could be leaning towards President Trump in this election if they're undecided. So, I know there's a lot of votes out there yet to be counted. There's a lot of votes that have to be counted, and let's hope they count every single one of them. I think we're setting a good example here in the state of Tennessee. Of course, we've passed a lot of discriminatory legislation over the past 10 years. Secretary of State Trey Hargett and this supermajority have done everything they can to prevent people from voting, from voter ID laws to criminalizing voter registration, you name it. Unfortunately, those hurdles are in place, but people are doing everything they can to overcome those hurdles. We also prevent former felons who have their records expunged and others from voting, which is completely unnecessary. I think every American should have a vote and a voice in who represents them in any office. But despite those hurdles, the people of Tennessee are finding a way. They're getting out to the polls and they're voting. And they're voting in mass. And I don't expect any big sea change in the state of Tennessee, but we are going to see momentum towards Democrats across the state of Tennessee, like I said.
And like Representative Garrett, you too believe in the integrity of the results, at least especially here in Tennessee, that they'll be accurate, and you trust in them?
Yeah, I think we're in good shape here in Tennessee. I think we have safeguards in place. Though I have worked polls and I have seen voter intimidation at play personally. I was working in Memphis, and they tried to keep an active military personnel, a black woman, from voting in Memphis while I was standing there, simply because she had supposed to have been called away for active duty, but that had been canceled, and she was still there, still had her ID, still had the correct address, and they told her she couldn't vote. not even with a provisional ballot. So, those types of instances, those and worse, are happening. We need to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to vote and every vote is counted. Because if they're not, that calls into question the integrity of elections.
Let's take a break on that note. When we come back, more phone calls, more of our conversation with our two representatives here, one Republican, one Democrat, as we talk elections right after this.